Hey guys, it is June 2nd, 2026 here with your after hours recap. So again, the market, as we've been talking about these last couple days, just continues to be super strong. Obviously last night, Jensen talks about MRVL being the next $1 trillion opportunity, and you get a gap up and
VDX
effectively the
3000%
biggest
burst.
move of this entire run. A 32% up move on the biggest piece of volume. And then not only that, you are getting followed up with a gap up overnight. Yes, this is very, very picture perfect, parabolic blow off move kind of stuff. Yes, I know he said $1 trillion market cap. Yes, I know that's like another 5x from here effectively. But when you get a 30% move on the biggest volume of the entire move, you get an overnight gap up, you get another big move tomorrow. If you get another overnight gap up again for whatever reason going into Thursday, you start to really set the stage for a parabolic, capitulation, right? To the long side, everybody's in. And really that just unfortunately sours some of the semiconductor space. The last thing you really want to see is Marvell, SanDisk, Micron, ARM having these parabolic blow-off moves. That is not necessarily an ideal scenario, right? That goes for a name like Dell. This is vertical, guys. This is absolutely vertical. You're just kind of trending higher. Yes, you create a really nice base, and then you just go nuts. So again, for Marvell, although the move is great, congrats if you're along. If we were to get another push tomorrow, yes, I am very, very tempted, tomorrow, Thursday, even Friday, to play some of these things on the short side. And maybe they push for a little bit more. And then you can get through kind of a Friday's expiration, go into Monday, and then have a nice, mean reversion on the short side as a possible trade. So I still own ARM, and I did reduce some today into this 426 level, and then you get a nice all-day unwind, plus now it looks like a little bit of gap down overnight. So we'll kind of see how that plays off. And then PanW had earnings today. Really, really nice push in after hours, unwound all of today's move, and now effectively closing on those lows going into the market close. It is 7 p.m. Central Time, so the market will be closing here. And I said this with CrowdStrike too, you better hope some of these stocks that are trading at 12 times their ATR from their 50 have cured cancer. Because if they haven't cured cancer, it's very unlikely that you're going to be 10, 11, 12, 13 times their ATR from the 50 and then gap up and keep going. It's just very unlikely. But yeah, I digress from there. One of the very best groups today, Uranium. If you look at CCJ, absolutely epic push today. Last couple of days, very, very strong. It wasn't just CCJ. It was also UEC. It was UUUU. You were also getting some follow up from the rare earths. MP, excuse me, with a little bit of a follow up there. And then obviously some of the semiconductor stocks, we've talked about these already, continue to be super strong. AEHR, obviously very nice. RMBS is another one that comes to mind. Obviously super, super nice. AMAT continues to be a monster. KLAC continues to be super strong. LRCX, AVGO. I mean, these semiconductors today are just unbelievable. And for the last couple of days, you've been seeing tons and tons of strength in the IGV. And then obviously today, little bit of a gap down from last night. You got a little bit of a push on the back of PanW and CrowdStrike, and then you unwound some of that move right back into today's lows. So just be kind of thoughtful of what is going on in the market. How are you buying things? How extended are names before you go plowing into a bunch of new merchandise? Again, it's not that I'm not bullish Micron. I'm in Micron. But as you on ARM or on Micron, as you start to get very extended from key moving averages, you just go back and remember that eventually gravity is a real thing, and you do not want to be buying extended when you could be maybe looking at things that are trying to emerge from a bigger base, right? Something like MP, that makes a whole lot more sense if you're buying it yesterday. Versus, yes, I know MRVL is making another move up, and I know that this thing is speeding up, so it feels like, there's something to do there, but you want to be a little bit more cautious before you start plowing into names as they are extended from bases. Copper continues to be really good. FCX trying to emerge from a pretty big base. HBM also pushing out from a really nice base. SCCO today I thought looked pretty dang good. So copper, in my opinion, is definitely something to keep an eye on. I do look at crude oil, and I find crude oil to be fairly interesting. Why? It's also building a nice base, and it's not really going away. I look at FANG, and I say to myself, you know what? That doesn't look too bad. I look at VLO, and I go, boy, that doesn't look all that bad. It's just building out a brand new base after a really nice push. So, can crude oil go higher? How does that affect the market? I don't know. I think you kind of got to treat things that you own from lower with their own kind of stop losses above the rising 10 and the 20. You just have to remain patient. And then on brand new merchandise, where are you buying it? What's emerging from a base? And please do not chase extended. I know people get the urge to show up here and buy Pan W, and then all of a sudden you're just kind of round tripping most of those gains, even though you get a nice push in after hours. When you get this kind of a run into earnings, you're pricing in a lot of what could be some of those good earnings while you're getting potential breakouts in aluminum, or you're getting some really nice digestion in what looks to be some solar, or what looks to be Enphase. Just let names build out their high type flags, let names consolidate, and then you show up in a couple of days to buy that when they're trying to emerge from big stage 4 downtrends. Really, really nice push. Let them set up again for some potential continuation. I'd tell you the same thing about Sedge. I'd tell you the same thing about First Solar. Let some of these names consolidate before some potential continuation. But obviously, the market continues to be super strong. There was some news in after hours. If you were looking at it, apparently there was some explosions heard in Bahrain. You got a little bit of a washout, and the market bounces right back. That just kind of goes to tell you that it really doesn't matter the news. The market's not trying to sell off. But on the flip side of that, you look at what's going on in the crypto space. You should not be looking for the lows on these things, right? They don't look very good. They wash out some, and then they just don't bounce back as strongly as you think they might, with being as washed out as they are. Why? They're below the 200 simple moving average. And there's just really nothing to do here. I don't know why. I keep seeing people looking for the lows and looking for the lows in crypto, and people keep talking about it more now than ever. And it's like we're in a downtrend. And you're in a downtrend in a really strong market, which is even a bigger red flag, because you have to kind of put your thinking cap on what happens to the crypto space, if and when the market does finally decide to, give a little bit of a pullback. I don't know what's going to happen, but you definitely kind of got to be conscious of that going forward. But anyway, I kind of digress on the crypto space. Not something that anybody should really be paying attention to. Again, nice push today in the semiconductors. A little bit extended here, 9 times its ATR from the 50. Is this really where I'm showing up to buy anything brand new in the semiconductor space? Maybe outside of NVIDIA? Not really. But you continue to get nice breakouts in AMAT, in LRCX, in AVGO with earnings tomorrow, in RMBS, in AEHR. AMD continues to be super strong. Intel starting to look pretty interesting after having gone sideways for the last couple weeks. We'll see what this one does. But ultimately, I think, just being a little bit more patient here makes a whole lot more sense. XLU, finally a nice little update, but boy, this thing has kind of just been getting beaten up for the last few weeks. Do we really make a big deal out of a simple update below the 200, below a declining 50? I don't think so. XLK continues to be an awesome sector. But again, at 12 times its ATR, does this feel like a great spot to take a bunch of new longs? I don't know. And that is not to say that we can't continue to have more of an up move, but without a consolidation, you really should be thoughtful of how much brand new exposure you're putting on up here. That's not to say you can't put on exposure, but please be careful with how much exposure you are putting on up here. Energy, again, nice little update today. I don't mind what this is doing in terms of building a base. You know, you look at VLO, you look at FANG, you know, you look at a name like HAL. These things don't look all that bad. They're just consolidating not too far off their highs. So does money start to flow back into some of the energy space? I think that is completely possible. So yeah, just lots going on. I still own some ARM, but I continue to trim into strength. I still own Dokken. I thought that this one was doing well today. Didn't really do anything wrong considering IGV closed down. I still own IGV. I think that this one could use some more consolidation. I still own Micron. I don't think this is doing anything wrong. Going to continue to trim into these extensions. I still own NBIS. Pardon the dog. The dog's just playing with this little squeaky toy. I still own NBIS. Don't think that this, again, is doing anything wrong. Yes, a down day today. But can we make anything, heads or tails out of a stock having a little bit of a down day when it's 8.5 times its ATR from the 50? No, not really. And then, again, still have SanDisk, and I still have NVIDIA. And I didn't really love NVIDIA's action today. I thought that that was kind of odd. I was hoping for a little bit more. I did not trim into strength, but I did take a third of my shares off today when you went red, and I still own SanDisk. I also still have a piece of SQQQ, not anything big, down about 2.5% on it, not a big deal. Yes, I know the market's kind of speeding up, but I do own some longs for that scenario, and I would like to play the mean reversion if and when it's going to happen. I do have some SQQQ on. We'll see kind of what the market decides to do with that going forward. But still lots going on. I do like the rare earth, and I like the nuclear space. I think that those are really nice spots to pay attention to. I like what the industrial metals are doing. I like what copper, I like what aluminum, I like what steel is doing. So those are definitely interesting to pay attention to. I'm not very interested in taking a ton on the long side in terms of tech related. I did buy some Tesla today, so we'll see kind of how that pans out. Really not doing anything too wrong. It held the 200 simple moving average. In an ideal world, it can start to push up from here. But if the market, begins to pull back in any kind of way, I don't know that Tesla holds up too well in that environment unless there is rotation into that name for whatever reason, if the semis begin to pull back. But still, again, lots of good going on in the market. You can't just be negative for the sake of being negative. But on the flip side, are you just holding all of your longs with not paying yourself into some of this strength? For some people, that is the right plan. Just continue to trail with the 10 and the 20 simple moving average. But for some other people, obviously, and even for myself, peeling some off into this, exuberance when you're 15 times its ATR from the 50-day on ARM, right? Paying yourself into some of this exuberance. And I would just go back and, look at a bunch of charts that have gone parabolic. At some point, they mean revert. I don't know when that happens, but I just don't care to hold, big positions into any kind of that mean reversion or a potential top. Of course, the idea as any swing trader is that you don't own, or that you do own through the eventual top, and then eventually you get stopped out on what is the backside. But in some cases, holding, even if you were to say I'm holding for a close below the 20, I'm not in the mood of holding a 30% pullback, right? 120, 30 points. That's just not my personality. But again, you have to figure out what kind of resonates with you, what makes most sense to you. For me personally, it'll always be trimming some off into extensions and then looking for names and themes not extended from their key moving averages. But you go up, you go sideways. You go up, you go sideways, you go up. This chart is missing some sideways if it is ever to go higher. Otherwise, you start to gap up overnight, gap up overnight, gap up overnight. You're getting parabolic, and for me, that means look for the other side of the trade, and that is exactly what I will be doing on a name like MRVL if that were to happen. So again, hopefully you guys are all capturing a nice move in this market. Obviously super incredible with some of the things that we are seeing out here, but please just be mindful of your size and what brand new positions you are taking. And with that, I will see you guys all bright and early tomorrow. Cheers.